becoming commoditized. They're becoming much smaller. Like if you speak to VMware, for example, they've intentionally shrunk down the code base of their hypervisor, and so a lot of that function has gone out to the management tools and middleware and stuff like that. So the hypervisor, whilst it's really interesting, if you find a 0-day in a hypervisor, wow, you're gonna own a lot of boxes. If it's the Zen modified one on EC2 on Amazon, wow, you're gonna own a lot of stuff. But ultimately, there's just the hypervisor is this, and then there's just this big umbrella of like new stuff. And so the open source software may not be brand new, but the combination certainly is, and they're probably using it in interesting ways, which might lead to some openings. So I'm going to talk about 3 layers here. Or I put the red bar in the wrong place. That's meant to be infrastructure, platform, and software. So we talk about infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a process. Software as a service even. And infrastructure as a service, what do we mean by that? I'll give a beer if someone can tell me what infrastructure as a service is. That's an unofficial beer question. I just threw that in there. Anybody? What's infrastructure as a service? Yeah, you can get a new server. So you can spin up, in this case, it tends to be a virtual machine. You can spin up a virtual machine on demand. Okay, so beer for you. You won't be here? Great. We've got spare beer going. Oh yeah, all right, thanks. Chris was just jumping up for that beer. Now, platform as a service. So, as an example, like Amazon EC2, that's infrastructure as a service. So, platform as a service. Anyone know what platform as a service is? I think the guy that's sleeping there, I think he knows. Nobody? Platform as a service? Oh, yep.
Like you get your server administrator, somebody pushes the updates for you, but you can install software.
Say the first bit again, because I'm not sure I heard you.
You get the software, you only get access to the administration interface, and somebody pushes updates.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's kind of more the next. That's the next one. That's more like software as a service, really. Platform as a service. Have you heard of Google App Engine? Google App Engine? Yeah? Not really. So Google App Engine, that's what's called platform as a service. What does it mean? It means that it's a development platform. So in other words, you would code some application, perhaps on your own machine or on their kind of platform in the cloud, and it would run on their servers. So instead of having to manage the operating system like you would with infrastructure as a service, like with infrastructure as a service, you've got like a Unix box or a Windows box or hundreds of them, and you have to manage everything. You're responsible for the security of the host. Platform as a service says, look, we're going to hide all of that stuff from you, and you only need to worry about, think as a developer. Yeah, so we're going to make a whole bunch of like interesting developer APIs available to you. So we're going to give you like a database store that you can access via an API. So platform as a service, Google App Engine is a great example. And then software as a service, that would be like Salesforce.com. So it's, people always say, well, isn't that just ASP? You know, in the old days there was ASP, which then suddenly became software as a service, and people were like, well, what changed? And the best definition I could find was that with ASP, if I was your ASP and you're running some financial application, I would basically build out a whole dedicated environment for you, take your software, run it on there, and configure it just for you. And you'd have that dedicated physical set of machines and that dedicated software. With software as a service, it's multi-tenant, which means that we're all sharing, all my customers are on the same set of machines. And that's quite a big difference. Like infrastructure cost, it's a lot less money to do that. So that's why they can charge fairly reasonable rates for software as a service. I'm not going to go through this, but you should check it out, because this is something that Chris put together, and he actually did it over Twitter. So it was like loads of other cloud people kind of chirping in with different things, and it's actually a really good way to look at cloud and sort of to understand the layers, because it's, again, cloud being a fuzzy subject. So I just encourage you to actually look at that offline. I'll bore you to tears if I go through it, and then you'll say I haven't talked about security. So quickly on the Jericho Cloud Cube, hands up, who, this isn't for beer, who knows the Jericho forum? Got a few people. Okay, so about half a dozen people. It's a UK-based group that is large enterprises that have come together to try and solve some of the collaboration challenges that they see. Like, how do two large enterprises share data, in a confidential way? That's doable. But what happens if you've got 20 large enterprises and they want to do this? And so, I mean, they've done more than that, but that's kind of what they started with. And so what they did quite helpfully was put together this model, and there's 3 dimensions. You've got, is the cloud external or internal? So is it running in my data center? So is it a private cloud, or is it external? So is it like it could be with a third party that runs it just for me, but it's definitely not within my perimeter, within my data centers. Then you've got another dimension which is proprietary and open. Well, we know what that is. People like Amazon, they built a proprietary platform, so all their stuff is proprietary. Yes, they're using Zen as the hypervisor, but there's a lot more than just a hypervisor. They had to create a billing system, and it turns out billing systems are really, billing at scale is really hard to design from both an operational point of view and a security point of view. So when I talk attack surfaces, it's like brand new billing systems that were created from scratch. The other dimension is whether it's perimeterized or deperimeterized, and that really just means, is it within your network domain or is it outside? And that's really whether you would need to connect via VPN to a cloud or whatever. So this cube is just a useful way to kind of, if someone's going to talk to you about cloud, first thing you say is, well, what layer are we talking about? Are we talking about infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, or software as a service? Because they're 3 very different beasts. And then you say, well, is it going to be external, internal? Is it open? Is it proprietary? Is it within my perimeter or outside? So straight away you've managed to kind of zone it right down to something that you can ask meaningful questions about. So here's an example of a public cloud as an alternative to keep talking about Amazon. This is Microsoft Azure, and they do a kind of software and services model. Obviously they do software because they want some license fees to continue. But if you look at this, the developer, who's unfortunately got no arms, he's at the bottom there. He's the guy just shoulders, head. He or she is creating software in Visual Studio that's kind of been cloud enabled, and then when that's ready to rock and roll, pushes it up to the Azure platform where it executes, and it can interact with a whole bunch of web services that Microsoft offers. And so what's the deal with the public cloud? Well, it's public. Yeah, the API endpoints are accessible to anybody on the internet, so that can be good or bad. And there's no beyond the terms of service and SLAs. There's no bit that's yours. There's nothing which says this segment of it is yours. They are going to manage the back end, and your data could be kind of anywhere in their data centers. Virtual private cloud. Amazon a couple of weeks ago just announced this. They've taken their public cloud, realized that a lot of customers they're talking to are saying, we want something a bit more private, but we don't want to run it in our own data center because we don't want to buy all the equipment. So what they did was they said, all right, we'll take our public EC2 service, and instead of plugging you can only have one network interface card on an EC2 virtual machine. It's just the way they've set it up at the moment. So I think all they're doing, based on the description, they give no technical data at all. They're just reading between the lines. It looks like all they do is they switch the NIC from being in the public EC2 service to being in some kind of basically private network, which is then attached to you via a VPN. So what's the attack surface? The attack surface is the virtual NIC driver. It's a pretty small attack surface, so it could be quite hard, I would imagine, to kind of escape from either a public EC2 and jump into somebody's virtual private cloud. But that's the level of sharing we're talking about. If you think about shared web hosting, it's kind of like really similar to that, except for you've got, instead of the security being at the process layer, which it is with shared hosting because you're all on the same machine, with virtual private cloud and public cloud, it's at the virtual machine level. So yep. And then private cloud, this is what VMware, Cisco, EMC and others are currently marketing big time, which is you convert your existing data center into